Welcome to another edition of ACX University. Today's episode is Q&A with QA, and over the next 30 minutes, the ACX Audio QA team will discuss audiobook production topics and take questions from producers and narrators seeking educational content and technical support. This year, we're building off last year's episode, How to Pass QA Every Time, and in that episode, we took you through our audio production requirements and presented you with a condensed list of pre-production and post-production tips to help you avoid some common recording, editing, and mastering issues. This year, we decided to slow things down and zero in on post-production specifically. I am joined with two members of the ACX Audio QA team. First up, we have David Afonso.
What's up, guys? Hey.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is David. I've been with ACX for about 3 years now as part of the audio team. I've been working as an audio engineer for roughly 7 years. I've worked within many different fields with audio production, music, performing arts, as well as a little bit of broadcast. I was featured on last year's episode, How to Pass QA Every Time. I had a great time doing it. The feedback has been overall positive, and so I'm super excited to be here this year, once again, to help you guys out.
We're super excited to have you.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
We also have Mike here. How's it going, Mike?
Pretty good, thanks, Scott. My name is Mike. I've worked at ACX for 3 years as well. Prior to this, I worked at a voiceover studio as an engineer and producer, and I'm happy to be here and hopefully share some of our tips with you.
Awesome. David, do me a favor. Tell us what we're going to get into today and set us up for how this episode's going to go.
Right, so this series is really, this episode is part one of a 3-part series on audio post-production. This is really geared and dedicated to the new ACX producer. Many producers, when they first sign up, they're excited and anxious to just get started with recording as soon as possible and really just release their book to the world. And it kind of prevents them from thinking that far ahead into the production process, to the post-production stage. And that's totally fine. That's expected. With no prior experience, how could you anticipate and prepare for what to expect? And so that's where they really struggle and get frustrated and discouraged and really don't know where to start, really. And so there's this misconception out there that all post-production tasks are tedious and time-consuming, and this is completely false. This is only tedious for the unorganized producers. So that's why this year, with this video, part one, we really wanted to break it down to the basics and give you guys the foundational information to help you guys start to build a productive, efficient post-production workflow.
I love it, and I think it's going to be great. So let's kick things off with, like you said, getting organized and
Right.
having some of that foundation. Mike's going to take us through our first topic, which is file organization and management.
That's right. So one of the first steps we recommend when creating an efficient workflow is setting up a network of folders in which to store and preserve your project, the different stages of production. So beginning with an external hard drive that's dedicated to only your audio productions, this will be your audio production hub. This is where all your files will live, and using an external hard drive will alleviate stress on your computer CPU, so you don't experience any sort of audio dropouts or a session crash. So we're going to go through our workflow of what our session folders look like. So beginning with the hard drive, you will we recommend creating a separate folder for each of your ACX titles. We're going to be dealing with many different types of files throughout an audiobook production, and we're going to want to store these all in specific places. So along with your project session, you'll have your source audio, and then we recommend creating a folder for your edited audio, as well as your mastered audio and your encoded audio. And we recommend this so that you can always go back to your project at these separate stages and access these files at any point.
Yeah, God forbid I get a note from the QA team that something needs to be fixed in my book, and I have to go back and I'm editing MP3s that I've uploaded to ACX. So you really want to be working with whatever stage of the production that error happened in, right? In the wave audio or the pre-MP3 audio.
That's correct. It's important to always back up your audio and to save it at each specific stage.
Cool. Right. Excellent. So let's move on to our second topic. David, talk to me about creating a session template.
Right, so once you have your production hub and your network of folders all set up, the next step is to really start creating a dedicated editing session template. A session template is a great way to recall your preferred settings and workspace for the type of work you're going to be doing. So from the tools you frequently use to, setting up quick accessibility to certain settings and options and whatnot, a session template is a great way for you to just recall that workspace so that you can just get started with QCing your book instantly.
And when we were talking about this previously, you made a great analogy to me that it was almost like your desk at work, right?
Right.
Where,
so first day on the job, you set up your desk a certain way that allows you to be really productive
and efficient.
So it's the same concept, absolutely.
And then you're returning to that desk every day, and so things are where you left them, and you can pick up your pencil, or if you're still using a pencil these days, maybe you're an artist.
And sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, no.
And over time, you're going to start to get more comfortable. You're going to develop your own style and workflow, and so it's best to just create that basic template, and as you gain more experience, just build upon that same template.
And you can do that in pretty much any DAW. It's not you have to be using a specific DAW.
No, that's a universal option. You can save a session template within any DAW.
Great, absolutely.
Yeah.
And since this is really targeted at new ACX producers, I guess it's important to call out that just about any major DAW out there will allow you to produce professional audio for ACX. Some of the popular ones that get tossed about are Pro Tools, Reaper, Audacity is good.
Right, Logic.
What was that?
Logic.
Twisted Wave.
Twisted Wave, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
okay,
right.
Cool. So across any of those, you can use session templates, and once you learn a little bit about what you're doing the right way, you can produce great sounding audio for ACX.
Absolutely.
So now that we know what a session template is, Mike, why don't you take us through setting up that session template?
So within your session template, you're going to be dealing with a few different preferences that you want to set up and program so they're ready to go. The first of which will be your audio device settings. This is where you'll assign which hardware you're using to input audio into your computer. This will be your audio interface or your USB microphone, and this will tell your computer which device you're using. Secondly, we're going to be dealing with your file path settings. Now, this pertains back to your file hierarchy. Each of your files is going to be saved in a specific folder, and you're going to need to assign that in your DAW. Otherwise, you're just going to have a folder with a ton of different types of files, and it's not a way to stay organized. And finally, your project settings. This is where you'll assign which sample rate you're recording at, which bit rate, etc. And we recommend reviewing the ACX submission requirements so that you can start at the same place where you're going to end up as far as having a sample rate of 44.1 kilohertz. And recording at 192 kilobytes per second, etc.
Cool. Awesome. So now that we understand what a session template is and how to set it up, we're going to spend a little time going over 7 tips that will allow you to make the most of your DAW's editing capabilities. To get the most of your DAW, we've got 7 features that you should familiarize yourself with to hit the ground running. This is why I'm not a narrator. Always easy to trip over your words. So we're going to jump back over to Mike here, and you're going to cover the first 2. Playback speed is the first, right? Tell me about that.
That's right. So we recommend increasing the playback speed if you need to review your audio in a quick way, where you're basically just proofreading what you've recorded. This isn't a tool for editing. But if you just recorded a selection of audio and you want to move on, you want to make sure you've got everything in the manuscript. Increasing the playback speed and preserving the pitch if possible is a great way to do so.
Absolutely. And I remember when I used to work for Audible Studios, in the QC part of the process, like you said, not for editing, but in the QC, once you've edited your book and you're just listening back to it to catch any misreads or little sounds or whatever, we used to get up to about 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 at the most.
Sure.
That's what I would do, but I think anything more than that is maybe too fast, and you're going to start missing stuff.
You might lose some accuracy at that point. So definitely, don't exceed that point.
Yeah, find the sweet spot.
And if you can't preserve the pitch, you risk sounding like a chipmunk.
Yeah,
so
that's also
when
true.
you're listening back, not on the actual recording, unless you're playing a chipmunk character in a children's book or something. Right, there you go. Okay, so that's playback speed. Talk to me about inserting markers.
Right, so this is a great way to leave yourself visual notes and cues within your project session. You can timestamp specific points if you've flubbed a line or if you've done a few takes. you might want to just leave yourself a note to come back to that point when you're editing, and by leaving a visual marker is a good way to do it. And it's also a good way to navigate through your session file. If you're dealing with really long passages of audio and you have several chapters, you can leave a marker at the beginning of each one so that you can quickly just scroll throughout and not have to use the actual scroll bar on your DAW.
Cool. Sounds very convenient. And one thing, again, I remember is that if you're doing a book with multiple character voices or just a lot of different accents, or a character appears in the beginning and doesn't appear again until the end, if you don't want to take the time to pull that clip out necessarily and maybe save it as a reference, you can drop a marker where that character spoke, so you can go back to that and refresh your memory for performance.
That's a great example.
Cool. Hey, thank you. All right. Okay, so up third is our basic commands: cut, copy, paste, zoom in, zoom out.
Yeah.
David.
So these are going to be your basic editing commands, and really, you really want to get comfortable and familiar with these tools, with these options, because this is how you begin to harness the full potential of whatever DAW you're working in. So your basic editing commands: select, copy, cut, paste, zoom in, and zoom out. Selecting a specific region within a clip, selecting where you'd like playback to begin, copying regions, moving them around into different tracks, making cuts, cutting out any unwanted sounds, any sound artifacts, clicks, pops, mouth noises. Again, zooming in and zooming out for surgical edits. If there's just the slightest little breath that's bothering you that you want to remove from your recording, you got to be able to know how to zoom in and zoom out and perform that task and that edit, yeah.
And the cool thing is that those commands are generally the same across whatever programs you're using on your computer. So you don't really have to learn something new. Control-C or Apple-C, just like in Microsoft Word, is going to be copy in your DAW app, something like that.
Right. And it's definitely the starting point at getting familiar with your DAW. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's cool to get to the point where sometimes you see these really seasoned audio pros, and it just looks like it's unconscious, and they're like
muscle memory,
moving around so quickly and cutting this and moving that, and it's just got to be practice, right? It's just the more you do it,
it's just
practice.
Learn these shortcuts, and
absolutely.
I think for beginning producers, it can be easier to do it the long way because it's just what you know.
Right.
But if you learn your shortcuts and you drill them and you get that muscle memory, it will help out in the end, I think.
Right, yeah.
You'll
Eventually, when you get familiar with the tasks, you'll realize, hey, I know when to use this, and that's when having a key command will speed up your process significantly.
Cool. Excellent. Okay, so up next we have trimming and splitting items.
Right. So the trim tool is really handy when you're dealing with the outer boundaries of your clips. If you want to remove excessive space or remove any unwanted sounds. It also facilitates with batch processing. When dealing with the outer boundaries of your files, you can quickly select all your files and with one swipe edit multiple files at once. The splitting tool really helps with those of you at home who record on a single track. I know a lot of producers, they like to record the entire production on a single track. Splitting your sections, your chapters into individual subregions will help and will allow you to put these individual sections on different tracks. And it will just benefit the overall editing process.
So you said some producers like to put all of the book on a single track, which I'm intuiting others put it on multiple tracks.
Right.
Is there a better way to do it? Is there a right way to do it? Or is it just what each producer is more comfortable
I would say
with?
it's whatever you're most comfortable with. Obviously, I would assume that if somebody is working with a recording engineer, if the performer is working with a recording engineer, the engineer is going to probably use multiple tracks and record each section and chapter on an individual track. But for someone who's doing home recording and they're engineering the session themselves, they're probably going to feel more comfortable recording on a single track.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Either way, good to know that there's no one right way to do things.
Yeah.
Right.
Whichever is the way to stay better organized is the way to do it.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's great advice. So, keeping with Mike, moving on to naming tracks and color coding.
Sure. Well, you're going to want to name all your audio tracks, obviously, right from the get-go, so that you're not having to go back and find, oh, where's the prologue or where's the introduction. And color coding tracks is a good way if you're working with a lot of files. Sometimes we have multi-part books where chapters 1 through 10 are for part 1. You might want to just assign the same color to all these tracks, just as another visual way to stay on task.
And in terms of the naming of tracks, do you have a specific file convention? I know ACX doesn't require a specific file convention for the name of the tracks, but do you have something that you recommend that will help producers keep them straight?
Sure. Well, we recommend ordering your tracks, using numbers to order your tracks in the way that we want them to appear in the track list. So for instance, the opening credits, you're going to want to name it 01, or introduction 02, etc. Just because it's, from that point on, your tracks will always be in the correct running order.
01, opening credits, 02,
exactly.
Dedication.
Right, and that helps when you do get into like prologues and dedications and epilogues.
Right.
It could be difficult when a file doesn't start out with chapter 1 at the beginning. That's my fake narrator voice, chapter 1. Numbering your tracks, numbering your files will help you keep those in order if it's not a chapter that's easily audio recognizable.
Exactly, yeah.
Cool. Okay, we're pulling into the home stretch here. We're on our last 2 items. We have nudge.
Nudge. So nudge or set items, this is a way to align all your files at a specific point. Now we find this useful because in order to review that your files meet the spacing requirement for ACX, we do require 0.5 to 1 second at the beginning of all files and 1 to 5 seconds at the end of all files. A quick way to review this is to align all your files at the same starting point, and then review in your DAW, and then do the same at the end. And this is just a quick way to review that.
And nudge allows you to do that.
Right.
And it's a fun word to say, nudge.
It's fun.
Nudge. It's not nudge, it's nudge. And so finally, the last item on our list, fade-ins and fade-outs. David, fade us out of this section.
Yeah, fade-ins and fade-outs really help with controlling transitions between chapters and sections, especially if your production includes music. I know myself as a listener, if I hear a chapter and it ends with a musical piece and it ends abruptly, it could lead to an unpleasant listening experience. So adding a quick fade out at the ends of your files just helps provide a smoother transition in between these sections. They also come in handy for removing any unwanted sounds at the outer boundaries of your clips. Any clicks, pops, mouth noises, again, they're very beneficial for that.
And crossfading? Is that
crossfading, when you create an edit in between 2 regions and there's overlapping regions, adding a quick crossfade in between these 2 regions helps smooth out that transition as well.
Right, and you won't hear that. Sometimes I remember hearing like almost a little, almost imperceptible like pop as you go from one region to another.
Right.
And this will help smooth out.
And that'll
things
help
like
with that.
Right. Absolutely. And just hitting on the topic of music, I want to caution ACX producers, music can get pretty tricky in productions, whether it's from like the right side of things to make sure you can't just take a song off an MP3 and throw it onto your production. And also it can be sort of a next level technique in terms of your editing and getting the music into there too.
Yeah.
So new producers may want to try to avoid working music into their productions. And then as they get a little bit better at things, maybe try to take that on.
I would definitely agree.
And do it carefully.
I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
You agree with that?
I agree.
Everybody agrees with that. Perfect. So that closes out our sort of us talking to you part of things. Not that we're going to stop talking to you, but now we're going to get into the part where it is the Q&A with QA, and we're going to take your questions. We put the call out for questions on our social media channels, plug for ACX, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube channel, and our blog.acx.com. And www.acxuniversity.com. All right, my portion of that is done. And we got some good questions from narrators and producers, and we're going to do our best to respond to them, as well as to, hopefully we'll get some good questions from the YouTube chat that's happening right now.
For sure.
All right, so let's get into it. Jackie D asks, I tried the normalization effect in Audacity, and it looked good when I previewed it, but no matter how I tried to save it, it wouldn't take. I was editing the MP3 recording. I ended up using Amplify, and am waiting to hear back if that was sufficient. I would have liked to see the normalization work, though. What went wrong?
Okay, so in Audacity, I do know when you're processing effects, there is a preview button and then a process button. So do be sure when you're previewing it, that's not going to print it on the audio, but the process button will. So be sure that that you've selected that. The Amplify feature in Audacity is just a way to increase the volume of a file. So, but it does show you. So it has 2 lines. It has the increase button, and then what the peak value will be if you process it to that to that degree. So we recommend, our requirement is that the decibel level not exceed -3 dB peak. So if you're using the amplify feature, increase the decibel level until you hit there, and I would recommend processing your audio at that point.
Cool. That sounds like a really great answer. And I wanted to stress as we get into these questions, sometimes it might be hard for you guys to really be able to answer specifically what is happening for this exact user in this exact situation.
Right, yeah.
You've not seen their studio, you don't know their equipment.
Right.
But just in a very general sense, we're going to try to provide the best answers that we can. But check out forums.
Yeah.
Feel free to hit us up on social media afterwards, and we'll see if we can get you a little bit more information based on specifically what's going on for you.
We'll do our best.
All right.
For sure.
So, next question that was submitted in advance, we've got Lisa. I've set chains in Audacity, which has been very helpful. However, I've started using Adobe Audition, but can't seem to set chains. Is it possible?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So yeah, it is possible to set an effects chain in Adobe Audition. You definitely want to make sure that from the view menu, I believe it is, you want to select your effects rack, and from there you can select the plugins that you want to use on your mastering chain. I'm assuming that's what you're probably talking about. So from there you can save this chain as a favorite, as a preset, and also Adobe Audition offers a batch processing feature where you can apply this chain to all of your files within your production. So yeah.
Cool. Excellent. All right. I'm going to jump over to a question from the YouTube chat now. We've got somebody that would like to know, where is noise floor measured? Start, end, between paragraphs.
Right, so your noise floor is basically, anytime you're not speaking, it's the room tone that your microphone is picking up. So a good way to measure this is to just set up your microphone in your recording space, hit record, monitor through your headphones, and just listen to the room. Listen to if there's any devices making sound. If there's an air conditioner on, if there's anything like that. With the point being to locate any offending sounds that's going to be recorded by your microphone, and then try to isolate your microphone from those sounds.
So noise floor is just sort of an always under thing that you want to get straight before really anything else, and it's not just in one specific space.
Right. It's basically, and to measure it, just watch your meter. Record some blank audio, and then watch where it is on your meter, and that'll give you a good measure of how loud your noise floor is.
Cool. Excellent. Jumping back over to some questions we got in advance. Chris from the UK, I hope you're still awake. It's, it's about 9:30, so hopefully you're still awake. Chris asks, I am editing an audiobook in Logic Pro X. I am avoiding using any gating for breath reduction, and I seem to spend most of my time using the automation tool or to duck in the spaces between lines to reduce breath. Is there a quicker way, or am I just being persnickety?
I would recommend generally you don't want to remove too much of the breaths, because then it just ends up sounding unnatural. Mm-hmm. And that's probably why he's avoiding using a gate, because it can, if mishandled, it can sound really unnatural. Automation, I mean, that can be a pretty time-consuming task if you have a lot of breaths and you want to do it for each one throughout the entire production. But if you feel comfortable with volume automation, and yeah, I mean, sure, you can do it that way for sure. Okay,
so he's not just being persnickety.
No, not at all. No.
Okay, good to know. I like that the guy from the UK used the term persnickety. It's just very appropriate. So Chris doubles up. Chris has another question, and he wants to know, he's using a limiter to balance overall RMS and automation tool to increase or decrease volume on lines that require boosting. Sometimes RMS dips slightly under 23. Is it exact science?
Well, I think the question is referring to if the RMS level is changing throughout a file. The way we measure RMS is by taking the average of the entire audio file. So if you see RMS meter kind of dipping down and then coming back up within the requirements, that's okay. Ultimately, you want your final file to fall between -23 dB and -18 dB RMS.
Cool. All right. Jumping to a question from the YouTube live chat, I'm seeing any suggestions on recording cleaner or reducing background noise? This is a pretty broad question. Either of you guys have general tips for just reducing background noise and getting that noise floor to be a little lower?
Yeah, I mean, you need to, if your recording environment has a lot of hard surfaces, you can try using, duvet covers, I've heard, are a great DIY option to reduce reflections in the room and outside noise. But generally speaking, you want to record in an environment that has soft surfaces, so couches, carpeting, your bed, things that will absorb the reflections. A way to reduce that in post-production specifically, you could reach for the noise reduction tool, but again, I don't advise on new users doing that. The best route in that case would really just go back and try to address the issue at the source, really.
And generally, I think we talked about this a lot in the Q&A with, in the How to Pass QA Every Time episode.
Right.
It's generally always better to address the issue at the source, to not just try to fix it in post,
Absolutely.
to try to set yourself up for as much success as possible, rather than
absolutely.
imprint something on your audio and then have to worry about it later.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And one other thing to keep in mind is that low frequencies are going to pass through surfaces, whereas high frequencies are going to pass through the air. So if there's any sort of rumbling, if there's footsteps, anything like that is going to come through, the floorboards or the walls of your recording environment. And if you are addressing that in post-production, you can attenuate those frequencies using EQ by using a high-pass filter, etc. Whereas any sort of like electrical noise or anything like that is going to be more in the high frequencies. And I recommend using a graphic EQ if you do have any sort of noise to maybe try to pinpoint where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
Another question from Liz, who asks, I've heard you should edit before you master, but you might spend time on a file where volume is too low and can't be fixed. Why not check RMS, peaks, noise floor before you edit?
You certainly can do that. It's good to have as many of those checkboxes marked before you even begin recording, and then before you go on to mastering. Mastering, you're basically going to be using dynamics processing to change the RMS, to change the peak level, but if you can get as close to where you want to be right from the get-go, that's your best case scenario.
Yeah.
Okay, and you can probably check that along the way at multiple stages, just to kind of get yourself set and make sure that you're generally in the right spot. It's not you have to check it in the beginning, you have to check it at the end, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's
All
great.
right, cool. All right, so I think that wraps things up in terms of our episode. I think we've put forth a lot of good information today. Everything from setting your session template to getting some tips about your 7 sort of tools and tricks in the editing stage and in the post-production stage. Hopefully everybody enjoyed all the questions that we answered. If you have additional questions, by all means, hit us up on social media, hit us up on acxuniversity.com,
Definitely.
and perhaps we'll be able to put together a blog post or something that answers some of those additional questions. So
Perfect.
on behalf of David and Mike and me, Scott, thanks so much for watching. See you next
guys.
time.